Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show, and we're ready. I'm excited to review Hackney Diamonds, a new Rolling Stones album. Came out on Friday, although this was tough to get the physical copy. Actually got the physical copy today, but I've heard the album 5 times, and let's go through it. I'm going to go through it track by track. Now, you know the history, 18 years since A Bigger Bang, their last studio album of new recordings. A long gestation, but the reality is Hackney Diamonds was a pretty quick turnaround time. They started it late 2022, finished it February of 23. You're talking like 4 months. Obviously, a lot of that credit goes to Mick Jagger, but also Andrew Watt. I had never heard of him, but he's done an incredible production job on this album. Even the guys in the band said, he really put his boot in and really motivated them. And his production on the album, I think, is fantastic. He's also a guitarist and he's also a songwriter. In fact, the first 3 songs on the albums, he gets a co-write, and that's never happened before on a Stones album. So pretty interesting that the producer gets a co-write. But he's all over the album in a good way. Let's go through it track by track, and then we'll do a summary at the end. Opens up with Angry. I already did a video on that album. You can go into playlists under Rolling Stones videos. I did a whole thing on Angry. Long story short, I think it's the best opening track on a Stones album in a really long time. The last great opener I thought was One Hit to the Body on Dirty Work, but this is even better. Angry is a fantastic track. I think it's the best opening track since Start Me Up on Tattoo You, and that's a long time ago, 1981. But it's a great opener to the track, and it's a new Rolling Stones. Jagger had said that, and a lot of that goes to Andrew Watt. It's a big sound, big drum, big kick drum that opens that track. It's got a count in. Jagger actually counts a song in, and I think that's really cool. It's got a really powerful sound, big opening. It's got a great catchy chorus. The guitar solos kick in, and then the song takes off at the end. It really soars. It just roars and gives you chills. It's just a great track. Big bass, big drums, big chorus, big sound. Jagger's vocals are high in the mix, and he's singing in that high pitch, which sometimes could be a bit over-singing. But in this case, Andrew Watt really rings him in, and it's just a terrific performance, a great track, classic opener, Angry. Song number 2 is another co-write with Andrew Watt, and it's called Get Close. Elton John plays piano, supposedly. I don't really hear him on here, which we'll talk about. I love the opener of it. It opens up with like this really cool, funky opening drum lick, that Charlie would not have done. And it's great. These really big, great weaving guitars join in, and you get this really funky groove, big guitar sounds, big drum sound. Jagger's vocals are lower in the mix, which I prefer. He's singing in a lower pitch, and it's great. It's got a really great catchy hook. I want to get close to you. At one point, there's this drum percussion that comes in. The band kind of breaks down. And I'm thinking, because I knew Elton John was on the track, I'm like, well, this is where Elton's going to come in and play some really good honky-tonk piano. No, not at all. It breaks into a sax solo. The second coming to Bobby Keys, basically. Sounds like classic Stone sax. It's a great track. It's got big balls like Angry does. It's got big drums, big guitars, big bass. Great track. The only thing is Elton John's on there somewhere. I don't hear him, but I think in a way that's kind of cool. Instead of a duets kind of guest star album, Elton John's on there, but they mixed him out. I don't know. Really cool track. The third track, Depending on You, well, that's also a co-write with Andrew Watt. Interesting. It opens up with like an acoustic opening. Sounds in my ears like a 12-string guitar. But it's got a big sound in a good way. I love the production by Andrew Watt. It's awesome. It's got this really interesting pre-chorus where the pitch of the music goes down, but the vocals go higher. It's a really cool effect. Definitely, I don't know whose idea that was, but it's really effective. And then they come together, they meet in the middle. And it's really powerful. Great chorus, Depending on You. Throughout the song, there's this beautiful, faint slide guitar work. It's in the background. You could hear it if you're listening, but it's not overbearing. Again, the song's got a big sound, and it builds up and it ends, and it's got a solid backbeat throughout. Depending on you, 3 songs in a row, that is a great track. The 4th song, Bite My Head Off. There's another guest. You got Paul McCartney on there. And man, this song just roars. It's distorted. It's punky. Kind of sounds like it could have been on Some Girls. Remember that song, Lies, Lies on Some Girls, this punkish roar. It's kind of like that. It's just, they count the song in. It's like live in the studio. You know, they got Paul McCartney jamming with them on bass. It's like a live jam. And they're just balls to the walls. It pins you against the wall. It's that powerful. It's just awesome. The song breaks down again where you just got the drums and McCartney's bass. It's really thick, heavy, fuzzy, distorted bass, and it's killer. In fact, Jagger in the middle of it goes, "Come on, Paul," something like that. Keep it going, you know. It's just great. The guitars come in it and they roar like a blitzkrieg, man. And then the song ends and they go, woo, and you go, woo. It's awesome. I mean, it must have been so much fun being in the studio when they were jamming on that. The lyrics are kind of nonsensical, but that's the point. It sounds like he's just throwing them away live when they're jamming, although it does have a great chorus. So another killer song. What are we? 4 songs in, and there's 4 fantastic songs. 5th song, Whole Wide World. Another one. It starts off with a really good, catchy guitar lick, and Jagger's singing. Now, somebody who knows accents, let me know. To me, as I take a drink, to me it sounds like, is it a Cockney accent? I'm not sure what it is. It's like a Cockney accent, but it really, really works. It's just awesome. I love the way Jagger's phrasing in that Cockney-ish kind of accent on Whole Wide World. It's just awesome. It's got a really catchy, hooky chorus. It's got some really good guitar solos. They're like processed, really phased guitar. A lot of production work on it, but it sounds great. Jagger's singing great. Again, the band breaks down at one point. Jagger sings. The band kicks back in. It's just another awesome track. We are 5 songs in, and they're 5 great songs so far. Big sounding songs. The next one is Dreamy Skies. Dreamy Skies starts off as an acoustic track. It's kind of going to be quiet. The Stones do these great kind of countryish kind of songs. The slide guitar comes in. It's got to be Woody. He's a great slide player. Reminds me very much of No Expectations from Beggar's Banquet. Well, that's a really high compliment. And at one point the bass kicks in, and it's got a big bass sound considering it's an acoustic track with all this slide guitar work. Steve Jordan's playing brushes on the snare. It's really nice. Jagger sings great. You know, I gotta take a break for a while. It's just great. And then the song ends, and you're like, well, that was really good. But it's a false ending. It comes back in, plays harmonica, and then builds the song up again, and then it ends, and they go, yeah. And you're like, yeah. I'm like, wow, we are 6 songs in, half of the album, and it's a perfect album side. Just fantastic. Let's go into what would be side 2. Starts off with Mess It Up. Now, this is the one that's got Charlie Watts on drums. And it's interesting. It starts off and it's really lo-fi. And I'm thinking, well, maybe that's the original track from the original recordings. And then it kicks in to the modern production sound from Hackney Diamonds. But it's definitely Charlie on drums. You could hear that classic kind of Charlie Watts fill on the snare, and he hits the China Crash. Love that. It's kind of a really cool track. And then it goes into like these verses that are like, you gotta mess it up, mess it up, mess it up, all for you. Really catchy. You get it in your head, you really can't get out of your head. But it's interesting. To me, it sounds like it's a completely different song that's kind of pasted on what must have been the original song that Charlie was on. It just has that feeling. It works, but it's kind of quirky. In fact, later on, there's another part where it goes, do you want to hear it? Do you want to hear it? Almost disco-ish, almost like Bee Gees-like, and there's some falsetto in there. The song is just quirky, but it's catchy as hell. It doesn't fit, in my opinion, with those first 6 songs. But it works. It's kind of like a guilty pleasure. I could totally see that song catching catching on and being like a hit in clubs if they still have clubs. I don't know. It's like a guilty pleasure, almost like Emotional Rescue is a guilty pleasure. This is kind of like a guilty pleasure, and I could see it becoming a hit under the right environment. But I don't care for it nearly as much as the first 6 songs. The next song is Live by the Sword. Live by the Sword also has Charlie Watts. It also has Bill Wyman. And unfortunately for me, it's the weakest song on the album. It's just kind of, it's got Charlie Watts on it, so it's left over from those original tracks. And Mick had said they kept putting the album off because the original tracks were good but not great. Well, there it is. Live by the Sword. It's good, but it's not anywhere near as good as those first 6 songs. And Bill Wyman's on bass. He's got a big fat bass sound. It sounds really good. Elton John's on piano, and you can kind of hear him at some points playing some, good piano. Jagger's vocals are really good. The bridge goes to like the halftime, and there's a guitar solo, and you can really hear Elton's piano at that point. And then the song kind of fades out. But the reality is, it's just not a very good. It's just okay. You know what it reminds me of on Voodoo Lounge? There's a song called Brand New Car. I don't know, it kind of has that kind of tempo, just doesn't really go anywhere. So what are you going to do? Next up, Driving Me Too Hard. Well, that one's interesting. It kind of starts off and it reminds me very much of Tumbling Dice. And that's a real compliment because Tumbling Dice is kind of like a definitive Stones song. It captures that Stones magic that makes them unique. It's like they sound like they're going to fall apart, but they don't. There's like this push and pull that fights with each other. And that's the essence of the Stones that nobody else does. And Driving Me Too Hard captures that. Steve Jordan on drums does a wonderful job of capturing that push and pull, tumbling dice kind of groove. Jagger's vocals are great on it. Fantastic production. There's some really nice guitar work. The song breaks down again. I like these breakdowns, and the vocals and the guitar comes in and it builds back up and it ends. It's a really understated, excellent, excellent track, Driving Me Too Hard. Next up, Tell Me Straight. Well, there's your Keith song. I'm thrilled that Keith's only got 1 song on the album that he does vocals. That's the way it should be. I always said he's got too many. He's got 3 on Bridges to Babylon, and then, a couple other. Infamy was an extra one on Bigger Bang, and it was a lousy song. Keith has become like this Hoagie Carmichael balladeer, and it works well. But I keep thinking, man, at least on the Stones album, Keith hasn't come up with a really great riffy track since like Little T&A maybe on Tattoo You or Before to Make Me Run, which was amazing on Some Girls. Think about, here they are right here. Is there a really great riffy Keith song on there? They're not. They're these ballads. And that's what he does here on this album, Tell Me Straight. There's a lot of processing on Keith's vocals. It sounds good. They made his vocals sound really great. It's a good track. It's fine. It's got a good beat to it. It's a nice track, Tell Me Straight. It just kind of ends, and it just has a certain incomplete feel to it, but it's kind of a minor track on the album. But it's fine. Then the album kind of ends, at least officially to me, with Sweet Sounds of Heaven. I did a whole video on that. Sweet Sounds of Heaven is absolutely incredible. Lady Gaga and Mick Jagger are just extraordinary, the way they work together. I've said back in that video, and I don't want it to come out wrong, I didn't say it's not a great song. It's an incredible production, and it's an incredible performance. But the song has really grown as well. It's an amazing piece of work. It's a fantastic way to end the album. And they got the full-length song on the album because it just builds up and it builds up and it builds up, and you get this miasma of sound that's just percolating and building up, and then it erupts at the end in literally like a climax, a musical orgasm. It's absolutely astounding. And then at like the 5:15 mark, it ends, and you're like, oh, that was amazing. Except that it's like live in the studio, and you could hear Mick egg them on, and they kick back in, and they do an incredible thing. They flip it. Lady Gaga starts becoming like the lead vocalist, and she starts going back and forth with Jagger. Oh, yeah, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. And they just keep building it up and building it up again, and it's just extraordinary. I have a fantasy that, and it deserves it, man. I hope in the Grammys, whenever they do the Grammys, that song should be nominated for a Grammy as the album. And the Stones with Lady Gaga should perform at the Grammys with Stevie Wonder, who does great piano on there, Sweet Sounds of Heaven. And it will bring down that house down. I mean, it would be so extraordinary. And they should win the Grammy for that song. And everybody in that audience will be reminded of what real music that's powerful, that's organic, that just gets you off is all about, because the music of today is lacking it. This is a lesson in incredible music, and I hope to see them perform this with Lady Gaga at the Grammy and take it home, and everybody in the audience will be like, wow. And these guys are 80 years old. Extraordinary. What a way to end the album. Except it doesn't end the album, because there's no way to follow up after Sweet Sounds of Heaven except the way they do. A really classy move. It's kind of like these two old guys sitting on the porch celebrating the success of the album. They just had musical orgasms with Sweet Sounds of Heaven, and they're sitting on the porch smoking cigarettes, doing Rolling Stone blues, because that's where they started. You know, Keith on the acoustic and Mick singing, and it's real. And then Mick takes out his harmonica, and they just blow a great version of Rolling Stone blues. It is a perfect way to end a tremendous, tremendous album. So as you can tell, yeah, I really, really, really love Hackney Diamonds. The way I would review 5 stars, an all-time classic. 4 stars is excellent, 3 is good, 2 is fair, 1 is terrible. This is a really, really solid 4-star album. If Live by the Swords is kind of and Mess It Up is kind of a growing on me. So it may wind up being like 4.5 stars, which is really good. It's superior to any of these other latter-day Stones albums. This is a Stones album that if somebody's not a Stones fan, I always said, I really like these albums. They're great. They're just too long. Thankfully, the Stones took my advice, even though they weren't listening to me, and I said, stop making such long albums and tighten up the albums. This is a really tight 45, 48-minute album, the way it should be. In fact, if you took the best 48 minutes of these albums, they would be really incredible too. This album really works. This is a good way to introduce somebody to the Stones, much better than any of these. It's a tremendous upper echelon Rolling Stones album. 80 years old, it's a damn miracle. Great production from Andrew Watts. They should be proud. I want to see this album come in at #1. It should win the Grammy. And last but not least, when Charlie Watts died in 2019, I was like, they should just go out and end with dignity, because they're just milking it. They've been touring the same songs over and over again. They became like the Beach Boys, and it bothered me. Well, they have totally redeemed themselves. You know, I never would have thought they should have continued after Charlie Watts. But based on this, you know, Steve Jordan has really, and Andrew Watts has put a tremendous amount of life back into these guys. And they recorded a ton of other tracks, so hopefully they're better than Live by the Sword. And they can keep going, because there's a lot of life in this band based on this album. Let me know what you think. I'd love your opinion. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you're new to my channel, please hit subscribe. I got a whole playlist area of Rolling Stones videos. They're my band. Here's my Goat's Head Soup shirt. Pretty cool, right? If you haven't gotten Hackney Diamonds, you got to get it. Hopefully you can get it. I actually ordered the deluxe edition box set with the Blu-ray from the Stones themselves. It says track my package. It hasn't budged. It says printed out a label. So there's a distribution issue. I actually ordered this on Amazon. It still hasn't shown up. I actually went to my local record store and bought another copy, because it just seems to be tough to get this album. The distribution, considering they spent $1 billion in promotion, the distribution's kind of failing. But I hope it sells some really big numbers. It deserves it. Thank God for the Rolling Stones. They would teach everybody what rock and roll is really about. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you next time on the Alan Rosenberg Show.